Buddy, we're starting. We're live. What's the? What is the video finishing? Okay, we're live on Facebook.
That's crazy.
Oh yeah. I feel like I'm in the hot seat over here.
Can I ask you to be back in your hot seat?
Let's, you gotta buy me dinner.
But
What's yours? Oh, yeah.
I feel like you're not in the right place.
are we gonna try and organize?
Yeah.
You're like, just dodge the bullet.
Wait, but are you on it? Are we all on it if we're sitting over
I'll
here?
lean back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're good.
I'm feeling you, man. All about the fun side.
Someone can sit next to me. I don't smell that enough.
Oh, I can sit in the. Okay. Can I sit in the middle? Thank you.
I'm getting a complex. No one wants to sit here.
Oh, I'll sit here.
Yes.
Okay.
No,
I was waiting for their back here.
Your new phone's on.
Yeah. Okay, everybody say hi to Facebook.
Are we all on there?
Hi, Facebook. Yeah, we're live. We're live. I'm just telling my followers.
Live and unlive?
Whoa.
Yeah.
I love that.
What's up, followers? I'm live.
No.
Just for
Does
the
it show
spirit,
up on my
Yeah.
you up, sorry. Yeah, on the event, on me.
On yours.
What?
Yeah.
wild.
Okay.
Okay.
Alright, everybody's updated. See everybody.
Yeah,
Great. Yeah, everyone's in focus.
so exciting. I'm so glad you did that about me. Thank you.
A cool thing to do at your next memorial.
Live stream?
Yeah, live streaming. So you can get people from the other side of the world, the other side of the room,
Love it.
wherever you want. Yeah.
Very cool. So those want to sit with you, because they will be on your screen.
Hang on.
Awesome. So before I start officially, just wanted to say, like, feel free to get up at any point, like, go to the bathroom, get a tissue, whatever you need, and also please take food. So yeah, don't feel like it's rude to anyone. Hi everyone. I wanted to welcome you guys to Millennials Mortality, a young adult view on aging and death. And my name is Arielle Friedzanter. I'm really glad to be here, and to be here for the second time as a ReImagine collaborator. Please excuse me for reading. I'm very bad off the cuff. You'll see later when I speak. So I will be reading a little bit more now. ReImagine End of Life is a festival focused on exploring death and celebrating life through more than 250 events across the San Francisco Bay Area. This is a community-driven initiative sparked by ReImagine, a new nonprofit organization that believes that by facing death, we begin to live more fully. Your support in the form of your presence, your participation, your feedback, and your donations helps make this festival possible. As a thank you, ReImagine has created a special takeaway for each of you. The End of Life Times newspaper is designed to spotlight the work of our community and be an inspiring resource for you. Please take one, they're over there on that little table, and spend some time on it. Check out the back page with an invitation to ReImagine's special closing event, an intergenerational dance party and street fair for the whole community on November 3rd. You might be here today in wonder, in preparation, in remembrance, or in an effort to live more fully. No matter your reason, ReImagine aims to help all the voices in our community be heard. So before we get to the main event, I'm actually going to do something a little bit different than what ReImagine asks of us. Normally we just take a few seconds and introduce ourselves to someone next to us, but because we're a really intimate group, I want to take this opportunity to just go around and just say your name and in 6 words or fewer why you're here. So take a second to think about that so that we're not thinking while other people are talking. And anytime someone is ready, you're welcome to start.
My name is Josh. I'm here because death is hard. 6 words of yours.
You got it. You were totally spot on. Thanks for being first.
My name's Brittany, and I'm here because I love learning new perspectives on.
I'm Kevin, here to learn.
My name is Nancy, and I'm here to learn about how millennials think differently than my generation about that.
I'm Christina, and I'm here to connect with other millennials. Other like-minded millennials, which is 6 words.
Because it's hyphenated?
Yeah.
Gotcha. Well played.
My name is Glenn, and I like to master discomfort.
My name is Han, and I'd like to see more intergenerational conversation.
I'm Gretchen, and I plan on volunteering in hospice within soon.
My name is Michelle, and I kind of just want to think about these things. So,
I'm Abe. I want to experience and support.
I'm Carrie. I work with ReImagine.
I'm Devin. I just want to see what the kids are talking about these days.
I'm Jordan, and I want to feel as alive as possible in these conversations about death.
I'm Arielle. Oh. I'm Arielle, and we're all gonna die.
I'm Joseph, and I want to help make these conversations more playful and inspiring.
Is that everyone?
I'm Nate, and I'm awkwardly sitting on the outside.
Yeah, come on.
I was waiting to see if somebody else was coming. I'm really just here to learn. So,
Cool. Awesome. Thank you guys. Awesome. So now, in an effort to set the stage for the program you're here to experience, there's a short intention that ReImagine asks us to read at all of the events in order to connect us to all the events going on throughout the city. If you wish, you can close your eyes. Why are we here? It's a big question about life and about death. Perhaps we start a little smaller and first ask instead, why are we here, in this place, together, right now? We're here to create a brave space. We're here to explore big questions with a shared spirit of curiosity, humility, and empathy. We're here in community. None of us is alone, and together we can help inspire one another, ourselves, our loved ones, and our communities to engage in meaningful conversations about living and dying well. We're here to reimagine end of life, to envision a world in which we are all able to reflect on why we're here, to prepare for a time when we won't be, and to live fully right up until the end. We are here. So before we begin, I know I keep saying before we begin, and we've begun, look at that. I want to take a moment to thank Christina, Brittany, Jordan, Josh, and Joseph for participating in the panel you are about to experience. I want to thank Sinai Memorial Chapel for hosting this event and welcoming us into their space. And I want to thank my husband, Abe, who is my manager in every sense of the word. He's a sounding board for every program I create, makes sure I get there on time, and runs around like a chicken with his head cut off so I don't have to. Without Abe, today's event and all the work that I do would not be possible. I'm eternally grateful. Thank you all for being here. Last year, when I hosted the first Millennials Mortality panel in New York, the event had been born out of relationships. I met 2 sisters who work in palliative and elder care, and they introduced me to a 3rd woman working in grief and memorialization. The idea for the event came from a feeling of isolation, thinking I was alone as a young person in the worlds of aging, dying, and death, and excitedly wanting to share these perspectives and professionals with the world. This year's event, however, was born out of ReImagine, which is so cool to say after just 1 year. Christina and I met on the first day of ReImagine last year and hit it off immediately. And she introduced me to Josh, whose personal and professional experiences were perfect for this conversation. Brittany and I met through the Collaborator Facebook group, since she has hosted her own events this week. And And Jordan and I met because Dara, one of ReImagine's amazing staff members, told me about You're Going to Die, which you'll hear more about later. And when I reached out to millennial communities in the area, she was a name I quickly came across. Similarly, Hannah, another phenomenal ReImagine staff member, saw that there was an opportunity for connection between myself and Joseph just 2 weeks ago, and it took only moments to realize she was right. Tonight is about sharing our stories, our experiences, and our expertise. It's about affirming one another that we're not isolated in this work, and showing you that if you're interested in getting involved, there are many ways to do so. Tonight is about asking the tough and not so tough questions, about developing the tools to have difficult conversations with loved ones, about what they and you would value most at the end of life, and becoming informed about modalities of care, about grieving the loss of someone important to you in the ways that you need. Tonight is about connection and conversation, and we hope that this intimate crowd will allow for a more meaningful dialogue and discovery. And tonight is about defining what is typically thought of as millennial. I truly hate the term millennial. I'm just gonna put it out there. And I know some of you might be thinking, that's very millennial of me. But the truth is that I think it's an unfairly loaded word, implying that individuals between 23 and 38 are more interested in the screens in front of them than the people around them. That they only find inspiration in Instagram photos and not in actual moments. That they can only understand and analyze the world in 140 character Twitter messages. That they're more focused on the self-E than the other. And while these things may be true of some of our generation, it was important to us and to me that we convey tonight that our generation not only wants to talk about aging and death, but has valuable things to say. We feel that millennials, with our emphasis on choice and personalization, can carry the torch for patient-centered care. We strive, much like the generations that preceded us, to shed light on the world's injustices and taboos. Just as our parents protested the war in Vietnam and fought for civil rights, we speak truth to power through Me Too, Black Lives Matter, and gun control initiatives. So too can we change the conversation around death and dying by increasing awareness about palliative care and hospice, by not abandoning our elderly and sick, by committing to care for one another in the ways that value who we are as individuals and as a collective community. And despite our age, we also find ourselves facing these issues head on in our own lives, through our caregiving and loss of loved ones, the illnesses we struggle with ourselves, and the pain and suffering that exist all around us. Our needs and desires may be different from those of our parents and grandparents, and we need to take steps now to make sure we are cared for in ways that value who we are. So tonight, we invite you to really connect with one another personally and professionally. We're so grateful that you're here with us, and we hope that our program and this space can be whatever you need it to be. So now that you've listened to me speak for so long, I'd like for us to introduce each other and our work, and we'll answer a few questions that I'll pose and then open it up to yours. So I'm going to start with Christina. Christina Andreola, please tell me I said that right.
Yes.
Thank you. Christina Andreola is the owner of New Narrative Memorials, an event planning company based in Vancouver, BC, British Columbia, which specializes in celebration of life events. A decade of event experience became crucial to helping her family successfully host her Uncle Brett's celebration, where over 200 friends, family, colleagues, and students arrived to share stories of his life. New Narrative prides itself on being a valuable resource for families who are compelled to celebrate and honor an incredibly unique life in their own space, on their own terms. Most memorably, she worked with a family to plan an 80s-themed celebration of life, complete with $600 of takeout pizza, 2 mobile bars, and a live 5-piece band playing T's favorite songs. As a millennial in mortality, Christina works with families creatively, using a shared cloud drive, pin boards, and event hashtags to create a celebration that encourages a community to tell the most important story of all, the story of a life.
And now I will introduce Brittany. So in 2017, Brittany discovered the only single copies of her great-grandparents' autobiographies. She was so fascinated by the stories they had written, in his own words. Brittany read about how her great-grandfather fought in World War II and started the first Women's Army Corps. After the war, he was one of the founders to create the first university for American students living in Europe. Reading these stories got Brittany thinking, and it's why My Life, My Stories was born. My Life, My Stories is a 501c3 nonprofit, and its mission is to create connections between people of all ages through creativity, storytelling, and the sharing of history. My Life, My Stories is dedicated to building relationships between young adults and older adults to create a more empathetic community. Older adults are paired with volunteers, and together they create a memoir filled with stories to be shared with loved ones for generations to come. To date, My Life, My Stories has helped more than 100 older adults around the country preserve their legacy.
It's beautiful.
Okay, my turn to introduce Jordan. So Jordan Edelhet believes in the power of asking questions that often have no clear answers. It's probably why she instantly fell in love with the nonprofit so boldly named You're Going to Die, an organization that encourages the courageous presence of each storyteller, musician, and human who opts into an open mic focused around death and mortality. She is honored to lead Alive Inside, an initiative of YG2D that brings creative expression on grief and contemplating our shared mortality to prisons across the country. And now I get to introduce Josh.
This is very well done.
I
Good
know,
job,
we
guys.
didn't even need to.
Maybe we should spot.
Josh connects with people and creates portraitures. Portraiture, yes. He captures content for marketing campaigns, big and small, and documents stories. He's particularly interested in the grief journey and photographed the last 19 days of his dad's life. Connecting with people in this way allowed him to connect with so many others struggling with their losses, so he built a space for people to be able to do the same. He founded Grief Narratives, a community resource for people to share stories of grief and loss, and is in the process of starting a podcast with his mom on the same topic. He grew up in the Pacific Northwest, which means he finds comfort in the trees, clarity in the mountains, and is numb with happiness in the water. It's his happy place, and sometimes he sells fine art prints of the places he explores, making other people happy. Most of all, though, he is at home in the company of authentic relationships.
Ladies and gentlemen, Joseph. Joseph has spent his career leaning into the most complex problems he could find. First the U.S. public education system, then social impact startup innovation, and now end-of-life care. At the age of 25, he launched his first entrepreneurial venture, a not-for-profit to help teachers avoid burnout. He then went to work with another nonprofit, systematizing their role of placing dream directors in high schools, codifying their theory of change, and building out the training infrastructure to allow them to operate at scale. Following that, he helped build a social impact startup studio designed to conduct original research and launch startups that take on large-scale social issues. And most recently, his most recent venture, After, creates products and experience that help people think about their end-of-life legacy and end-of-life wishes. Through their deck of cards, the Starter Pack, and their new board game Now and Then, After's products take the edge off the conversation so people can feel comfortable bringing it into their homes. Joseph has a background in product design and takes great joy in designing After's products while leading the work they do with organizations. A native Torontonian, Joseph now lives with his wife and 2 dogs in Brooklyn, New York.
Thank you. Hi, nice to meet you. I'm going to introduce Arielle. Arielle completed an individualized master's degree at NYU in May 2018, concentrating in Judaic studies, bioethics, and social work, with the goal of becoming an interfaith chaplain. For the last 14 months, she and her husband are taking time to travel the country while she helps families and communities engage in value-based end-of-life conversations. Arielle believes that individuals can write the ending to their own stories by preparing themselves and their loved ones for their eventual deaths. She hopes that early and frequent conversations will reduce the stigma around aging and death. Since death isn't optional for anyone, she wants to support those who are bereaved, confused, or unsupported, to help them find the means they need to cope and to continue.
Thanks, Jess. Awesome. So now that we've all sort of been briefly introduced, or not so briefly introduced, I would love for each of us to kind of just introduce how we got to this point, why we're doing the work that we do. Doesn't have to go in that order, but you're welcome to go in that order. And yeah, just how you got here.
Yeah, so like I said, I am an event planner, and I have spent the better part of the last 10 years doing event management. So in a variety of roles, from catering to furniture rental to working with some great wedding planners in the city of Vancouver. And I went to event school, and in event school I learned how to do a little bit about weddings, corporate events, baby showers, all that happy stuff. And I knew how to do the little components, and then my family of 14, my Italian family of 14, was rocked by a loss in our family. And we all came together as families do, and I was voluntold that I was going to do the memorial, and I was more than happy to take on this load because I knew who to call for catering, for flowers, I knew how to do the logistics, the speeches, get everybody organized and on the same page. And we did his event, and it was, like the bio said, 200 people. We were all sharing stories, and I remember after the event, I kind of thought to myself, why aren't more event planners doing this kind of work? My family was very lucky to have me, and what happens when other families don't have this kind of resource, I guess in-house, if you will, and what happens when they want to do something different, or they want to have a lot of people and come together and celebrate. So yeah, come on in. So after that, I started New Narrative, and since then I came to ReImagine last year and to New York, and now here I am. And like Arielle said, I met Arielle, and it's been very interesting. The work is very fulfilling as an event manager, working with families. Like I could go on and on and on about how weddings and memorials are similar, and how there's a lot of logistics, but it's different, but it's not. But that's my story, and how I got to ReImagine.
I can go next. So Christina mentioned that I had a great grandfather and great grandmother who wrote their own stories. But the reason why I thought about creating a nonprofit versus a for-profit company was because I feel like underrepresented seniors in our community are the most forgotten about and have the least connections to their community. So we focus on helping low-income seniors, vets, LGBTQ elders, homeless people, and people of color, immigrants. And we find that there's a lacking in intergenerational connections, especially I think in San Francisco, when a lot of the companies that we work for are skewing younger ages. We don't work with older people. We are often not from San Francisco, like myself, who don't have family members close that we can connect with. And I recognize that there was a desire in the city to form deeper connections outside of the typical volunteer experiences that are offered through your company or online. And so we've created this long-term program that really encourages people to form deep personal connections, and I didn't think there was anything out there like that. And we currently have a long wait list of 100 volunteers who are really wanting to be paired with a senior. So there's definitely a desire from the young community here to get more involved, and we're trying as best as we can to make that happen. It seems like we're going in order now.
Yeah, it does.
Which is fine. Again, I'm Jordan, and for people who maybe are local, which might be most people in this room, but has anyone been to You're Going to Die or heard of this organization? Okay. So You're Going to Die is a nonprofit, and we're most well known for an open mic we hold typically monthly at a venue called the Lost Church in the Mission, with no religious affiliation. It was a really cool space. And the hope is that people gather around the topic of grief and death and loss and our shared mortality and whatever that brings up for them. So people really speak to it in all forms. People share about death in their life, of the people who they've known and been close with or not. People talk about death of an identity or a relationship, and just allow grief to be present and to witness each other in that. And people do all sorts of things, and the only rule is that you have 5 minutes in that moment, in this experience, to share. And I started going a year and a half or so ago, and just instantly thought it was one of the most unique spaces I'd ever found myself in, and unique events I'd ever been to, experiences really. And shortly after that, made the connection that there was a space and a need for that, to be doing that also in the justice system and within some prisons, and bringing that to people who can't come to the show. And so I had spent several years working in a prison in Ohio when I lived there, and we've since grown into being able to host either multiple day experiences where we'll go into a prison and put on a couple shows, and then also do a show on the outside, and again using the topic of grief and loss to share different creatively with each other, music, poetry, whatever it might be. And then most recently have been able to start going into San Quentin and have plans to continue expanding that program, and are always, and I will shamelessly plug that right now, are always looking for more prisons and justice facilities or opportunities to connect. So if anybody in this room has it tonight, or like a year from now you remember, you just email me, we will start something new together.
I didn't even say this or talk about this with you, but I think the quickest way to just explain where this all started was just to share this is a short slideshow, but it's the photos that I took while in the last 19 days of my dad's life. And I'll explain why that led me to building grief narratives and why I think it's an important conversation, but I just thought it would be best to just show this first, except I just lost the spot.
It's approved. Let me talk about it.
Sorry. Technical difficulties.
You're doing great. I feel like the silence is the worst part. Everyone just staring at you.
Everyone,
great.
So the idea for me to do that actually came from a family reunion. My uncle had been dealing with a terminal illness for 5 years, and we met actually in California. I'm from Vancouver, but And he spoke to us. We have a really big family on that side, so there's about 50 of us, and he sat for about an hour and talked to us about what his experience was dealing with a terminal illness and facing end of life, and you walk away from a conversation like that, and obviously it helps shift perspectives and it changes your priorities a little bit. And so that was the Christmas or the New Year's right before that summer. So I came home from that wanting to create a photo project around that topic and around that conversation. And so I was working out that idea, and I had an idea, the thought of volunteering at a hospice and having those kind of conversations and creating that imagery and then building that into a project. And I was actually talking about it with my dad, who was perfectly fine at the time. He actually named it. He came up with the title Millennials Mortality, which I thought was a clever title. And then in that summer, he got really unexpectedly diagnosed with cancer, and he was diagnosed on July 13th, and he died on September 9th. So it was quite quick for us. And in that ironic turn, he became the subject. So I mean, when I first even had the idea, like when my dad first got sick, my mom and I were both hesitant about even bringing the camera in because it is a very intense and personal and vulnerable space. But we decided to bring the camera and create that. And when I ended up putting that out there on my website, so many people reached out with their own stories about what they had gone through, about how they had lost. Like, I'm not the first person to lose a father or a brother or a sister or an aunt or an uncle, or like it happens to all of us. And I found so much comfort in people reaching out to me and saying, hey, look, this is what I went through, this is what I went through. And so that made me think, you know what, it'd be really cool if we had a space where people could just send in stories and read other people's stories. And in that experience, I think, find comfort in the communion of it. So that's really the story of how Grief Narratives got started. And then since then, I've been invited into the hospital with families to kind of recreate or create imagery like that for them. And so that's something that I'm exploring now in my own work at home, but that's the story.
Thank you for sharing that.
We already have the bio, so I'll jump into a specific moment. I was responsible for defining the theory of change in an organization that was setting out to have all young people live lives of passion and purpose. That was our mission. So in one form or another, what my job was to figure out, how do you teach purpose? How do you evaluate purpose? And it was like, for me, you all don't know me yet, but like that's a dream job. That's like literally like spending all of your day talking about the meaning of life. How do you scientifically, what are the best people from positive psychology saying? And that was the conclusion. I'll jump right to the end point. The conclusion was that if you are in pursuit of something that you love, if you're in pursuit of something that matters to you, that affects more than just you in the present moment, then you're going to experience purpose. It's a practice you do every day. It doesn't accumulate day over day. And that's what we were teaching young people. And it was like, I was like living and dying by it. I'd come to totally drink the Kool-Aid. At the same time, I was going through my own spiritual journey. I had come across Eastern mystical traditions. I had found the mystical traditions in Judaism, which is what I was raised into, and the consensus that I found in that felt almost exactly the opposite. It felt like the answer to that question was stop being in pursuit. Stop chasing, stop striving so hard, and that's the way that you're going to achieve peace, fulfillment, thriving, all the things. So I lived in that for a little while. That tension. Like, do I chase? Do I achieve? Do I work really hard and set goals? Or do I just accept and just be? Around that time, one of my really good friends lost both of her parents very suddenly in a car accident. They didn't have their affairs in order. The way she tells it, she went to their home and their incomplete, their not notarized wills were on their bedside table. That was the beginning of learning about how really messed up it can be if you don't have your affairs handled. But it also sparked something else for that conversation that was more core to me, which was a reconciliation of the two things. It was the acknowledgement that there's going to be a world we're no longer in, and that there's nothing we have to do to make that happen, that that's going to happen one way or another. And so you are totally free from all of the responsibilities of what you have to or should be doing. And in that world, there'll be people who will be impacted by you for better or for worse, ways big and small, intentional and unintentional. And you don't have to put any attention to that, but you can. You can be intentional about the impact that you're trying to leave, and that the sum total of that is your legacy. That's the word that we've come to use for it. That you can draw purpose not from these 3 to 5 year goals or from like just doing things that feel like they'll help you or your family in the near term, but from the big thing, the world you're trying to leave behind. That's really the conversation that inspires me to create tools. What we've created here was the product of a bunch of workshops we were doing, where we were trying to understand where the breakdown was in the process. It seems like people are more open than ever to talking about mortality and end of life, and it seems like there are more tools than ever to get a will done online or whatever. But the process is still not happening, and what we identified was this breakdown in the middle, where people actually have to make the decisions, actually have to have the conversations, the part where everyone's like, I can only help you so far, this is on you. Death Doula's biggest fan. There are some amazing attorneys that will walk you through the whole process if you can afford it. We wanted to create things that you could bring home with you, that would allow you to go through this process of not just starting with questions like, do you want to be buried or cremated, but who are you? What's your life? What are your responsibilities? Who are your people? Let's start with what you know. Let's start with what is. And the deck of cards, we'll talk about it more probably in a bit, but the deck of cards is about exposing you to the questions you should have. It's just an exposure tool. And the board game is a whole journey. Who you are today, and what you're thinking about the future, and your after. So that's why.
All right. Like I said, I don't do anything off the cuff, so I did write some notes. You guys are all very eloquent. It makes me very nervous. Sorry. Okay, so I'm gonna go way back in time to when I was about 6. I spent my grandmother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's when I was 6, and I used to spend every weekend with my grandfather. And we would spend Shabbat together, spend Friday and Saturday together, and usually we would go to visit her in the nursing home, and we would pretty much spend most of Saturday there, always Friday before Shabbat began, and it was something that I just was very comfortable with. I didn't think it was weird. As she progressed, I sort of just learned what those diseases unfortunately look like, but it didn't scare me. There was never a fear of being around her. There was never a fear of being around others in the nursing home. And it wasn't until I probably got to college that I realized attending, I don't know, a dozen or 24 funerals by the time I had gotten to college might be weird. Again, it was just a very comfortable space for me. And I remember I kind of always say I was always ready to go to a funeral. My parents would say, oh, so-and-so died, and my first answer was okay, when's the funeral, when are we going? And so that didn't feel strange to me. But then in college, I sort of started figuring, okay, well, I wanted to be a rabbi, I wanted to be a doctor, where does this all kind of fit together? And I came across palliative care chaplaincy, and immediately was that's what I have to do. This is the perfect thing for me. So I started doing some clinical work. I did 400 clinical hours at Children's Hospital in LA, and then a few years later, did 400 hours at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York. And at the same time I was working at Sloan Kettering, I was also doing my degree at NYU, and was in the process of writing my thesis, which was on the attitudes of conservative Jews toward physician-assisted death, or medical aid in dying, death with dignity, lots of terms. And basically, in addition to like the very kind of specific details of what I learned, bless you, from the research, the big picture thing that I learned was that people really are not aware of their options at the end of life, whether they're legal options or not legal options, whether they're personal choices or familial choices, what their religion says about it. They just were not talking about it. And at the same time, so this was a kind of a busy last 7 or 8 months of school, both of my remaining grandparents passed away. So just to give you a context for the timeline, this was December 23rd, 2017. My grandmother passed away really suddenly, and we think without suffering, which was wonderful. And my grandfather sat the entire traditional week of Jewish mourning, which is Shiva, and he died the night that he completed it. And it was very surreal and very, in my mind and in many of my family members' minds, very contrived and controlled by him, willed, and absolutely perfect for him. And for us in many ways. I mean, of course, the pain of losing 2 grandparents in 10 days was unfathomable, but also was exactly what should have happened for him, because the pain of thinking about what it would have been like to watch him live without her would have been worse. So in addition to kind of having all those experiences at once and being in sort of the thick of these intense experiences, both with Sloan Kettering and in my studies and the research and these grandparent experiences, all of that was sort of, I don't know, it was in some ways like the perfect result of a conversation that I'd had with my grandfather about a year earlier. He had been in and out of the hospital over the course of a year, and on one particular visit home, he was just, I mean, I'll give you all the details, but he was like, I got home on a Thursday night, week before Thanksgiving, and he was really struggling to breathe. And there was nothing generally wrong with him at that point. He just was really agitated, and so it was making it harder to breathe, and then being harder to breathe was making him agitated. And about midnight, my mom and I got a call saying, you know, you should really come here. He's like, he's not going to sleep, and he's having trouble breathing. And so we went there, we tried to calm him down, and all he kept saying was, I just want to die. I just want to die. I don't want to live like this anymore. And fast forward, he was ultimately fine, went to the hospital, he was totally fine. He just wanted a 4 a.m. ambulance ride, obviously. But fast forward 10 days, and he was going, I knew he had a family meeting at his nursing home. Just to kind of contextualize it, he also shared a room with my grandmother, and he was still alive, obviously, just to give you I know I'm like jumping around in timelines. So they shared a room, and he was going into I knew he would be having this family meeting, and so I said, you know, I want you to know that you can make the decisions about what you want in life. He was cognitively fine. So he was going into this meeting, and I said, I want you to be prepared with what is important to you, not what's important to our family or to my aunts and uncles or anyone else, what is important to you. And so I played this game called Go Wish. We're full of games tonight. Go Wish, which includes 35 values someone might have for the end of their life and a wild card. And I've played this game with a lot of people, and he's the only, the first goal of the game is to narrow the 35 down to 10. So you're picking your top 10 values, and he's the only person I've ever played with who picked his top 10 on the first try. But when I talk about like controlling his death and knowing exactly what he wanted, he was all will. And when he ultimately died, a little over a year later, he got all 10. And part of that was that he willed it, that there were a lot of things he had control over. He had done all of his financial planning. He had made sure his estate was in order. He made sure that his family was there. There were a lot of things that felt like he controlled them. And then there were some things that he gave us the ability to control by telling us what mattered. And so that sort of was like a huge light bulb to me of saying, people are not talking about this, and maybe instead of just doing chaplaincy at the bedside, I can do early chaplaincy. Maybe I can get people to talk about this early. So as the bio said, my husband and I have been traveling around the country and just trying to get people to have these conversations, whether it's parents of young children about how to talk to their kids about death, whether it's millennials who are often really neglected in this conversation, and we have really valuable experiences, and very deep and meaningful experiences to share, and a lot of thoughts about what can change and what we want differently. Whether it's working with older adults or really adults of any age, on what matters to them and how to create those documents that are so important, but how to take it one step further and have those conversations. Because oftentimes, I think I would say there are not enough people filling out those documents, but it's even rarer to have someone fill out that document and have a conversation. And if they don't, that document gets left in a drawer, or it gets left on the bedside, in the bedside table and is never signed, or it's in a safe deposit box where no one can get it. And so the family member gets to a hospital bed and has no idea what decision to make. And then that leads to grieving the way that they died instead of grieving the person they lost. So I'm trying to change that. And and that's why we're doing this, is to be able to have more and more of these conversations and spread the word. So that was a lot longer than I did. That's what happens when I only write notes and not whole thing.
You make a good point though about your grandfather, like the things that he said. This is what I really want, but these are also the things that I will let you decide on. Because I find that, you don't want anybody to feel super guilty about not honoring your wishes or what you may have wanted. So that's important too. That's just as important. Yeah. It's like, here's what I want, but here's what I will relinquish control over. Huh.
I have a question.
Go for it.
You talked about change. What is the one change that we can do to further the conversation, to get more people involved? I mean, we know to write their stories. I think that's incredibly valuable. To have comedy or maybe stand up.
Comedy.
But just a comedy. Yeah. But what would you like to see there?
Well, one thing that we found that is very important is that it's actually a conversation and not one-directional. So often, at least when my parents introduced their will to me, they bought an apartment and they're like, we need to talk to you about our estate. And I was like, cool. And what that ended up being was like them telling me all of this stuff. And I was a recipient. And at one point in that conversation, I was like, well, here's what I would want. And they were like, we're really not comfortable talking about you passing away before us. And I was like, that's your baggage. But all of our tools, and like I think you can also get it from the reason why I'm in this conversation, is because I think everyone can derive value from not just at the highest level thinking about their impermanence and their legacy, but actually doing the work of thinking about what kind of ceremony they would want, what they want to become of their body. Now with like, you can be a gem, you can blast off into space, and all of these things are reflections of you. And to have these conversations not in some hypothetical, when I'm 80 and I have grandkids and all this money, then this is what I would want. But today, because we all have a plan, it's just the default, which is a shit plan. So if we take the time to create a plan for ourselves at any age, then hopefully it never gets enacted. Hopefully it's draft 1 of 100 and we get to not put this one into action. But it's a source of tremendous purpose in the moment. Having these conversations with even your grandparents or your parents or anyone in a way where we are all participating, we're all sharing our wishes equally, is a way more inviting way to engage people, because everyone's talking about themselves and each other rather than just centering, let's all gather around grandma and it becomes very heavy.
I find that, I find that humor plays a big part in it. Like, for instance, when I started talking, I remember my mom, me and my stepdad, and my mom's probably watching on Facebook Live. What's up, Mom? I was telling her, I mentioned something that I had joked about to a couple people about this thing called the crying corner. And I was like, Mom, when I go, I just want I want a crying corner. And she goes, what's that? And I say, a corner of the room where it's dedicated for everybody who's coming to my celebration of life to go and cry, because I was such a great person, brought a lot of great things into this world, and the mourners need a place to cry. And at the very least, like the Sicilian ladies that I already have on retainer that will be there just like wailing, like, you know, really sad, like it's gonna be huge. And then my mom is like, that's great, I definitely want one of those. And then my stepdad was like, what are you talking about? And she's like, oh yeah, you gotta get drink tickets, you gotta be in the crying corner for a couple minutes to get some drink tickets. And then he's like, I'm not doing that. And now my mom is just like bringing it up with people and like, oh, I'm gonna have a crying corner at mine. At my memorial, and when she talks about me and what I do, and they're like, what, a crime corner? And then, you know, it's this outrageous idea, but it just gets people thinking like, oh, well, that's not for me, but what is for me, and what would I like? And I remember her and my stepdad was like, well, what would you do? And then my mom was like, says some stuff, and what would you do? And he's like, oh, I guess margaritas until all the blenders just quit. I was like, oh, okay, cool. And it's just like you start with this big, funny, preposterous idea, and that kind of opens the floodgates and releases the tension, and just like, oh, okay, we can talk about this stuff. We can talk about the bigger things, and then that led to me finding out my mom's preferences and figuring out, you know, what my stepdad wanted, and then the two of them in the room together, and she was like, oh, I didn't know you wanted that, and he was, I didn't know you wanted that, or something like that. I don't know. She'll probably correct me when I get back home. But yeah, it's
space.
Yeah, exactly.
I was gonna say making the conversation approachable is I think something that's necessary, because we hosted, My Life, My Stories hosted its own ReImagine event where Hong and Kevin were at on Sunday, and I was blown away at the uneven number of young people there were to older people who showed up, because the conversation surrounded death and dying, and that proved that there is a need for spaces and safe areas for people to share deep and personal conversations. And I think similar to your organization and even your website, it's sharing these feelings with strangers maybe is more easy for people, and I think it'll take a lot of small cultural shifts to make a bigger change, to bring it in front of your family and make it a more regular conversation.
Yeah.
I think I've found in the last year that every time I mention to somebody what I do, they share a story. Someone who died well, someone who died badly. There's always something that comes up for them. And I found, like, there's another conference that I participated in, and someone said, you know, I would imagine people in your generation like really don't want to talk about this because you guys are going to live forever. And I was like, well, we are, obviously. But I said, actually, and it was somebody who was much older. I think he was probably closer to my parents' age, and and I said, actually, I find more pushback in your generation. Like, people in my generation are willing to talk about this. And not everybody. I mean, I always say, like, an event is going to be self-selective. You don't have someone come to an event on mortality unless they want to talk about mortality. And they might be scared, and they might be curious, and they're coming to it from different perspectives. I'm sure we all are. But I think people who want to engage in it are going to have the conversation, and then the question, like you said, is how do we get people who aren't already engaging in it? And so I think these tools, like the books and the games and the films and the photographs, like all these things are such cool ways to do that. And I know in our family, like my husband and I sat down with my sister and my parents, and we played Go Wish. And there's one way to play it where you have two decks, and so if let's say Abe and I are playing this, and so I'm gonna pick my top 10, and Abe's gonna pick my top 10. So we're both trying to figure out what I want, and it becomes this really easy conversation of like, oh, wait a second, I thought this would be really important to you. And it turned out when we played it that we had gotten 60% of my parents' choices right, and they only got 40% of our choices right. And part of that is generational, part of that is that we don't have kids, part of that is that we couldn't care less if we're a burden. I don't know. Like, there are so many other reasons. We don't have financial things to get in order. Like, there are a lot of reasons for that, but I think being able to kind of open up that conversation and play these games and being able to say, like, this really, I know this is something I've heard at like every ReImagine event this week, talking about it is not going to make us die.
Yeah.
You know, we are all going to die. That will happen, and God, you know, hopefully it's a very long time from now, but if it's not because we had the conversation.
Also, I think language has a lot to do with this. I feel like most of the conversation is dominated by the medical industry, the legal industry, the financial industry. You could say that like death doulas and spiritual leaders also hold a place, but in practice, like the decisions you need to make are dominated by these industries that own the language because the whole design is from the documents out, right? We need to get together and design this, work on this will. We need to get together and do your advanced directive. I just don't think that's the way people think. Like, it's just not a very human way to approach the conversation. There's a much more intuitive thing for us to talk about. Like the games we use, Go Wish also doesn't use any technical jargon because there's really not a reason why you should need to learn a whole medical or legal language in order to make these decisions that you actually have all of the answers. You actually know the answers to these questions. It doesn't make them easy, but you can answer these questions. And I think, especially for people our age, there isn't the will to learn that language. Like there's no real incentive to become fluent in that legal jargon. And so being able to translate it into language is pretty straightforward. We use a framework of the 5 chapters of end of life because we found that really intuitive. There's your care, there's your body, there's your ceremony, there's your treasures, which is your estate, and then there's your legacy. And when you get people to design each of those, they can design from sort of blue sky. And then you find that at the end of it, sort of like, surprisingly, you've answered all the questions you need to answer to complete the documents, but it's not designed from the documents outward, it's designed from a human, it's designed from a human place. And when we work with practitioners, it's a big part of what we talk about is, you need to be able to say all of these things in your own words. Because if you have to rely on technical jargon and translating that for your person, they're going to check out. It's just like, speak to them in their language, approach them with the frameworks they already have, and then they'll be much more willing to engage with you in the conversation.
I'm curious if any of you guys, and I probably will share myself, if you can share an experience of a challenge you faced in doing this work because of your age.
Well, I started this business a couple of years ago, and going from the events industry where I would say like I'm quite well known in Vancouver from the work that I've done into this brand new space where I didn't really know much about, like I only had the experience from my own family and my own personal journey of event planning for this celebration of life. Coming into a bit of a foreign space that's very regulated, like in Canada, very regulated, there are strict things on, like the law is pretty strict. There's a little bit of a gray area, but as to what a celebrant can do, an event planner can do, like when you need to become a funeral director and when that's not okay. But just coming into an industry that's predominantly either older or licensed, it's like it took me a bit to kind of find my footing and to get in there, and I'm still kind of playing with that about where kind of I fit in, because everybody, to quote a very good friend of mine, they all look like my mom's friends, and yeah, it's like I'm coming into this industry where everyone looks very similar, and they're all older, and who am I and how are they going to take me seriously? And I've been going to networking events like often enough and making connections, and that, you know, people are recognizing me and they're like, okay, this girl's not a fly-by-night. Somebody actually said that to me, a funeral director took me out for coffee, and he's like, so there's a lot of controversy about you in this industry. Like, you're a very polarizing figure. Okay. And this was in January, and he's like, are you sure you don't need to be a funeral director? But it's just like, I don't know. I felt a little bit of a barrier, so I'm still working on it. But it's as a young person doing something brand new, it can be tough to find your community. I'm starting, and there is a growing community in Vancouver, which is really cool. I think a couple of my friends are tuning into Facebook right now, and that's been a challenge.
Yeah.
Just since you said so many people were local, there's a great San Francisco End of Life networking group. It meets the first Wednesday of every month. It's run by Nate from USF. So just a plug for that. It's
What's
free,
it
it's
called?
wonderful. San Francisco End of Life, so sfeol.org. It's been going on for 20 years, and there's
Do you have
actually
young
all
people?
ages, yeah.
Yeah?
Not as many youngs to come, but we do have like, it's usually about 40 people show up, and there's everything. There's maybe one attorney and, but for the most part, it's people who've been in service or have been touched. Like, I ended up there when, it's not about me.
You can share this.
So,
It's okay.
San Francisco End of Life, it's wonderful.
You really can.
I would be
What do you
I
What a cliffhanger.
You have to tell.
So the conversation's two-sided.
Exactly. Go, tell us.
Yeah.
Thank you. I ended up there because after a friend of mine told me everything he wanted and didn't tell the right people, best intentions from them, but did everything opposite, so I saw someone have what's worse than not talking about it, or what happens, the consequences, and that's a bad death. And so I didn't know what to do, but I knew I couldn't let that happen to more people. And so I just showed up at San Francisco End of Life. I listened to a podcast on End of Life, and that took me there. And there's great people. And
Somehow people who work in end of life stuff are really nice. That's usually.
Yes,
That makes sense.
absolutely.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, when you speak to that, to me, that just reminds me how beautiful community is, and what does this whole conversation look like when you're in community? What does it mean to just sit in this room in this circle, and that feels so much more doable to like. We had a show last night with You're Going to Die. That was actually with ReImagine Earth, so it was Your Planet's Going to Die, which was a new thing for us to explore on that conversation of grief in a focus setting. But that image came up of when you're exploring such big topics, how much better it feels when you're standing on the edge of these big things and you're holding hands with people around you, and you're really going one step at a time with the people around you. And whether it's starting hospice work or just saying I want to show up for my friends in different ways, there's so many different ways that we can do that, and it feels like the most important first step in some ways to build community.
Different communities that are out there, like not just in person too. I've really found a good community on Instagram of all places, and I've been connecting with people from all around North America and a few in Australia, and it's just via social media and being able to message my friend Joelle or my friend, like a bunch of people that I know around, and just like I'm having a hard day, or my friend Megan in California, and just like, dude, I'm stuck on this thing, like this work is kind of getting me down, or like a community to turn to is really, really nice online. Yeah.
To that question, just since I started this work, I thought a lot about the 5 stages of grief, which I know is not a sequence, and all sorts of questions about whether it's valuable as a grief tool. But I think about it with regard to the response that I think people generally have to the thought of death, the thought of loss, the thought of their own impermanence. That minute by minute, it changes. Go through like moments where you're in denial, moments where there's anger, moments where there's bargaining, moments where there's depression, and moments where there's acceptance. And I think the more time you're in conversation, the more time you spend encountering people who are near their end of life, or working with people who have experienced severe loss, especially recently, you spend more time in acceptance. I mean, the reality of it is so present that it almost, there are other ways to find acceptance, but I think that exposure is a really important way to be in that state. I think it is not unfair that some of the people that I've encountered at first glance would assume that I've not spent a lot of time in that state of mind. Really in a state of like, it's gonna happen. It is. I'm there. I'm with you on this. It is gonna happen. That doesn't make me depressed, and it doesn't make me angry. I think once I've started talking, then you get to a point where you're like, okay, I get it, that you actually are in this conversation with us. But I don't think that, I think it's a fair response that people who have lived through these experiences, or just have lived longer and have seen more of these experiences go by and have had more time to contemplate their own impermanence or think about their own eventual death, are more comfortable in being and spend more time in a state of acceptance. So I have had encounters with people who at first glance are like, you're gonna balk at this, but like in aggregate, I think there's been overwhelming support for more young voices in this conversation, and I felt like so welcomed to bring anything new into the space and to be one example of our generation participating meaningfully in the conversation.
I was trying to think, I mean, there's like one instance that like stands out of my mind. It was the only instance, and it's not like so significant. So I'm actually gonna skip that one. But I was trying to think of like the biggest challenge that I face in this work at my age and because of my age, and it's me. Like I've tried explaining this to my mom over and over again. I have total imposter syndrome, and it was very, very sweet. And I don't know if she's watching or not, but but it was very sweet. And she was like, "You don't have imposter syndrome. You know what you're talking about." And I was like, "No, that's literally it. I have imposter syndrome because I don't think I know what I'm talking about, even if I do." And I've had conversations with lots of friends who are kind of trying to support me in this, and I'll say, "Okay, but like if I give out a document that like, you know, if I publish a document that says this and this and this, whatever, like, am I undermining myself? Am I taking myself out of a job because now they have the document, they don't need me?" And I have one friend in particular who said, like, you are the asset. It doesn't matter what you produce. The fact that you're explaining it and you're talking about it and you're facilitating the conversation is the asset. And so I think that's a really hard thing for me to get over, is like, okay, like, you know, I've done, I don't know, 15 of these kinds of programs over the last year. Like, it's not as much as I'd like, but it's not small. And so even just being able to say, like, it doesn't matter that I don't know everything. It doesn't matter that I haven't had all these experiences all these years to be thinking about it, but I've had experiences that have gotten me to a place where I'm willing to talk about it, and I'm willing to facilitate the conversation so that other people can talk about it, and so many people aren't willing to do that. So it's literally a daily struggle to be like, nope, I gotta keep doing this no matter how many ignored emails I send. You know, I'm gonna keep doing it. It's a fun one.
Yeah, starting I don't have a nonprofit background. I started this on my own. $0, funded it like with my own personal finances. Still sometimes do, and I think it's a fear of putting yourself out there and being rejected and failing in front of the public. But I don't. Yeah, it's. I think surprisingly, San Francisco has been very open and accepting of anyone who's interested in older adults and aging.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think a big part of it too is that this kind of work hasn't really been done before, and that it's still very new. And I know in my context, like I've been saying this for a long time, people have been event planners for a long time, they've been funeral directors, but no one's really mixed the two together. And it's like, you know, not having somebody to look up to or to like copy, if you will. And just going through this new path, and I've been using the term like whacking through the corn maze. Like you're creating a corn maze, and it's really hard. Like you're starting with a big cornfield, and you're trying to like blaze a trail, but it's really hard because you're trying to, you know, forge your own path. And it's I guess for anybody starting, this is taking a turn into entrepreneurship. So
Totally.
a panel of entrepreneurs will tell you how difficult it is. But yeah, it's this work that we're all getting into hasn't really, like it has been done before, but it hasn't really been, I don't know, it's like turned into a business. Like it's starting to become an industry, and that's interesting and scary, very scary. And just
I keep saying, I don't want to do the business side of this. I don't want to do the outreach. Like, I'll sit in a room and lead one of these every hour. That's totally fine.
Yeah,
But it's like the business side.
Yeah, but again, it's like if you want to sit in a room and do this all the time, like it's marketing and it's getting your word out there and getting the message out there, which is so tough. And that's been, I think I've asked everybody, like, how do you get your stuff promoted? What are your tips and tricks and what's working, what's not working? And it's spreading the message in a different sense that is a big challenge too. Exciting challenge, but it's a big challenge.
It's the language, right? It's
Yeah.
like, how do you open the conversation? How do you make the space? I mean, in particularly, what would you like to hear from older people to open? Because I'm with the older people, and I'm I want to talk about it, but my daughter, my niece, doesn't want to talk about it. And then in the same room, they don't even hear each other. The other one's like, I want to talk about it. My mom doesn't want to talk about it. Don't tell her she's sick, kind of thing.
Well, I think it's part of what Joseph said. It's about making it a conversation rather than yelling at them. But also, in that example, it's just pulling a wisdom card and saying, sit the fuck down. Like, this is what we're doing now. Cause
we're on live stream.
From the older children or the younger person, whoever wants to start the conversation, one of you can.
Yeah, the example you were giving was you trying to talk to your kids and them not wanting to have the conversation.
Right.
It's like, well, I mean, exactly what they said earlier, like, it's not gonna make you die, like, we have to have this conversation. This is gonna make it way easier later. And a lot of that just comes with wisdom. So you gotta pull the long card.
Yeah, also, like, people love this conversation. Like, just from my experience, people love the conversation. It is always awkward to start.
Right.
It is always, there's not really like a magic set of words you can say that will make someone be like, okay, I'm willing to like skip through the first 4 minutes of like, what are we doing here? When you're in it, you can feel it, right? Like, you know what's happening. We're all really human. Like, first time I sat with my parents and had this conversation, full transparency about their finances. I was giving them full transparency about my things that I hadn't told them before. And it was a moment, it was like a super humanizing moment. I was like, I didn't even realize, I'm an only child, I'm super close to my parents. I didn't even realize that there were things that we were still hiding from each other, that I still saw them through the role of parent and not like just person, let's just be together, and vice versa. And I think that like there's not really a magic set of words that you can do. I to some extent I agree. It's like whatever you need to do to be in that conversation. I mean, you see we're doing backflips, designing board games to just give people the opportunity to say like, do you want to play a game? And then you're all sitting and they're like, we're not really talking about that yet. Let's talk about your life. Okay. But then it becomes the conversation. I think that's the point. So whatever inroad you can find. But it's sort of like, the highway is there, there's no on-ramps, so at some point you're just going to have to just drive over the ledge.
And it's just like, we were at a session today about home funerals, and there was a really good little blurb that was like, here are some ways that you can start a conversation, and one of the, was just sentences that you can just say, and they were as simple as, hey, I want to talk to you about something, or I'm putting together my end of life plans, and just let's chat, because I want you to be in on this with me, and just breaking through that barrier, like you said. And I don't know, there's no good way to do it, but it's just, you gotta, what is it, the best way out is always through. I mean, just gotta whack that, go through the corn maze.
I like that framing of like asking for help, because people are usually like really willing to offer their assistance and be like useful, rather than like making it about them, and people can get very defensive.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I don't need your help, or no one talk about it. Yeah, totally.
One of the cards I know is on Go Wish is not to be a burden to family. And you're like, I could care less if you're a burden. But to older people, and so a way to start the conversation with older people is like, gosh, I know that, Grandma, that you don't want to be a burden to us. And one of the best ways that I know not to be a burden is to play this game, or, write on your things or whatever. And so use that.
Definitely avoid, I wouldn't recommend starting with legal documents as the impetus, because that often is where it starts. I need to get a will. You need to get a will. Do you have your advance directives? It's just like, work. But there's the benefits also of the conversation. Let's talk about like your future. Let's talk about our future. Let's talk about, like I've started with, like the world we're no longer in. But we're talking about purpose, right? Let's talk about our lives. Who are we? Like there's a sort of consistent existential crisis that I think people of all ages are going through, but like is really quarter life crisis is like a thing. And people in their 20s and 30s are craving more conversation about themselves and like what they should be doing with their life. What is this all about? And for my mom to be like, I'm also asking those questions. Let's talk about it together, because what I choose affects you and what you choose affects me, so that's we should have this conversation together. And you end up talking about the things you need to know in the will. But I find that personally not an interesting inroad.
No, the conversation informs the documents.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's so much better to have those conversations when there isn't a crisis at hand, because then you're not clear-headed and everyone's angry at everybody, and you know, 3 kids who all know their parents equally well now have 3 different perspectives on what they would have wanted in that situation. And so that's why like also so much of this is based on values. Being able to write these stories and figure out what people's values are, not what they want in X, Y, and Z situation, because we're never going to know that exact situation, but being able to say, you know, this is really important to me, this is what makes life meaningful. I love sharing this story. There's Atul Gawande shared this in an article he wrote in the New Yorker years ago, that Dr. Susan Block, who's a palliative care physician, her father was having surgery, and she left the hospital the day before the surgery, and she got in the car and she was like, oh my God, I did not talk to him about how to make a decision for him if something happens. So she went back to the hospital and she said, you know, Dad, this is really awkward, but I need to know how to make a decision for you if something goes wrong. And he said, if I can watch football and eat chocolate ice cream, do everything you can to save my life. And she said, well, that's really weird. He doesn't eat chocolate ice cream or watch football. But okay. So she left, and then she came back she didn't come back. He went into surgery the next day, and the doctor came out. I guess she did come back. The doctor came out and said, you know, there was some complication, and we need to know how to proceed. And she said, well, if you do X, Y, and Z, will he be able to eat chocolate ice cream and watch football? And he said, I think there's a really good chance he will. So she said, then do everything you can. And they ended up saving his life, and he ended up paraplegic as a result of the surgery or whatever the complication was, but he was able to write more books and more articles and enjoy life with his family. And it may not have been the life that he envisioned for himself, but he gave her exactly the answer she needed, just in that simple phrase. And so being able to say, like, this is, like, she probably didn't know, maybe he does watch football, and she has no idea, but having that conversation, you know, makes life meaningful in the moment, even if it's not in the form of a crisis. It's saying, well, this is important to me right now, this, being able to sit with my family, if that's your answer. Okay, well, can you talk to them? Is it okay if you can't talk to them? And it kind of unravels those questions, but you at least get some sense of what makes life meaningful for that person now, not what would make life meaningful then.
One thing I just want to say and
Introduce
mention.
yourself.
Oh yes, hi, I'm Hannah.
Oh, the aforementioned Hannah of ReImagine.
Oh yes, ReImagine. And I just want to first of all commend everyone who is doing this work and putting in a lot of investment and time into the entrepreneurial and nonprofit side of things. I know it's like it's work, it's hard, and I commend you for that. But I also want to encourage you by saying one thing to think about is that you have the opportunity to like present a product or a conversation that literally applies to 100% of the population. Yeah. And there's no, if you're not working in death or birth, like there's really very little that can apply to that. And so, or maybe taxes. But it's like there's plenty of people who know like exactly, you know, or don't just show, and that we have a record of that. But it's that like figuring out then if it does apply to 100% of the population, then your market is greater than every other person's market when they're doing something for the first time, building something for the first time. and then it becomes all about the narrative. So then almost your market is too big, right?
Yeah,
And so then it becomes
exactly.
like, oh, my audience is too big. How do I now like do something that's more specific? And then that's like where you decide like, what is your story? Like, what is the thing that you're helping people do? And then people will align with that. And so just wanted to say, like, it is difficult and it feels like no one wants to have this, but it's also like you have the greatest opportunity, more so than anyone who ever thought that we'd be holding like 1 million smartphones in our hand, because there have been plenty of people who are like, oh yeah, but like, what about this like niche factor, they're not going to use it, or this like every single investor that you'll ever approach will always give you all the people who are never going to use your product, and what are you going to do about them, how are you going to convert them. You have like kind of an easier answer to that problem. So it just kind of stay encouraged by the fact that we're all gonna die. Really, as you're doing this work, as you're doing this work, like kind of keep that in mind that it's just I've got to figure out how to get to like the emotional aspect of it, because it's applicable.
Totally. And like on that note, in my industry, like in events, like wedding planners are a dime a dozen, and not everybody gets married, but everyone dies. So it's
it's good marketing.
Well,
But also, like people will remember someone's funeral with like such precision, because it's such an emotional moment, and you care so much about how that person is being seen, that they're going out. I mean, weddings, it's still a very important moment. But
And then you talk,
Thank you.
And actually, on the one quick comment on the topic of smartphones. My friend Megan, who runs 805 Funerals, she in California, she said to me a couple of years ago, like, our smartphones have changed more in the last, or she said the world has changed more in the last 5 years than funerals have in the last 100. And then I just thought, like, my iPhone has gone through more evolutions in the last 2.5 years than the modern memorial. And it's like, oh my god, like, things are evolving so quickly, and it's time that this industry caught on with it too.
So I wanted to give an opportunity, and we can definitely take more questions if anyone has, but if we want to like demo some of our stuff, since we're a smaller group, we can kind of do it all together. Demo some of our stuff, maybe have like a, I don't know, little workshop. I don't know if anyone wants to go first and demoing their thing. Again, feel free to ask questions throughout, but.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to show up the game. I'm going to be very happy to do that.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
Should we stand up?
We can stand
Let's
up.
do it.
Well, let's see. How are we doing?
Do you want to bring it in the middle here?
That's a lot
Should I
of
bring the gurney? Should I wheel the gurney? This is literally for carrying caskets, so you know
Let's do it.
Kind of interesting vocabulary.
Oh wow. Okay, let's go.
Right.
Oh boy.
That's good.
This is
I'm
fun.
not a very good driver.
No, you're doing great. Luckily, it's rear wheel.
Especially for a New Yorker.
It's-
This is awesome. Oh my god.
That worked out really well.
I don't know whose idea that was, but that was brilliant.
Lizzie,
Great idea.
maybe I can take a minute to just explain how it works, and then we can do an activity that I think would segue really nicely into any number of your different conversations.
Do you want us to move the live stream so it's like on it, or are you cool with this?
I think I'm okay with it. Maybe
Okay.
at some point I'll pick it up and like fold it.
Perfect.
It is, like I said, broken up into two parts. The game's called Now and Then. The whole first part is about your life now, and the whole second part is about then. So we're not gonna go into the then conversation just yet, because you will have gone through this process before you get there. Then is like very much like, how would you respond to certain kind of diagnoses? You know, who would you want to get what in your estate? What would you want said at your funeral? That kind of stuff. Now is parallel to that, so it's, for example, what does a good day look like for you? A perfect day, that everything was taken care of for you. Or, how do you take care of yourself? What's your instruction manual? Imagine you were switching bodies with somebody and they needed written instructions about how to take care of you. All of your allergies, all of your spiritual routines, everything, right? Again, it's all about your life now, so it's less difficult than like, write a thing for when you're, incapacitated. All your duties. This is like literally just list out all of your responsibilities. Everything that someone is counting on you for. You're going on a trip, a one-way ticket. You don't know when you're coming back. You have to hand off all your responsibilities, your pets, your plants, dependents. And then there are 4 legacy cards. This is my favorite one. This is, imagine you're writing a book of your life. Write just the table of contents. 10 chapters maximum.
I like that.
This is special places to you, a map of your special places. These are influences on you, good or bad. And then this last one is like if you had a museum of you, what would be the 3 kind of like exhibits, the things you're most proud of. And in the second part of the game, they're more future looking. It's your bucket list. It's what letters would you leave to people? It's things like that. The reason I said it would segue really naturally to any of these other conversations is the way you do these challenges is you have like 3 to 5 minutes to write, you share, you have a kind of debrief. But it's just a start, right? One of the cards is an invitation to my after party, right? Which, again, we're talking about now, so this isn't like when I'm 80, this is the party I want. It's like, imagine you're hosting a celebration of your life today. Write the invitation, include details like food, music, activities, or even colors and themes. This should be created to be the celebration you want today, not what you might want when you're older. And on the back, there's a little place to draw something and then to write words. And this would not be a good enough set of instructions to your friend to like put together a party necessarily, but it certainly is the thing that you need to walk into the first meeting.
Yeah,
exactly, right?
Bring me a card, tell me about their, tell me about them, and their preferences, their colors, their themes.
Exactly, right? You already have done some thinking, that's the point. And it's a social game, you have done it with your loved ones. I'll just, one more thing before I like actually give you some cards and maybe we can actually like take on some of these things. Is the first product we came up with is the starter pack. It's a deck of cards, 25 cards broken up into the 5 chapters that I mentioned earlier: care, body, ceremony, legacy, and treasures. And each of them has 4 wishes. So there's a whole section on ceremony. So one's like, where do you imagine it taking place? What details do you picture? Is there anything you'd like written or shared at your ceremony? And then the last one is your who. Okay, who's actually going to do this?
Okay.
And when we do...
Oh, I understand. Never mind. I thought you were like asking for volunteer. Volunteer.
I love that.
Just to finish it out, like when people play this for the first time, who especially like people our age who have like really never thought about any of this before, they talk it out and they're like, I feel like 5% good about what I just said. Like this is not good enough. And the point is, these are not the kind of decisions you make by yourself, just sitting and thinking. Like this is the kind of thing where you go to your who and you co-create it with them because they're the person who's going to have to put it on anyway. And then after that conversation, you're a lot closer to the finish line. So that's the starter pack. It's good for exposing people. This is Now and Then. Is the board game is currently on Kickstarter. Please all support the Kickstarter. I'll make sure to share the link. It's just nowandthen.xyz. But for now, let's just actually play with these. So each of these only has 6 cards, which means that we're not all going to do the same one. And we're only going to do one, because I don't want to, this is a 2 or 3 hour game, which we're definitely not.
That was my question. How long does it take?
It takes longer with more people, is the answer. With 2 people, you can do the whole thing, both sides of it in like 2 hours.
Is the idea that everyone, like if you pull out one of those questions, everybody is doing that activity?
You all do the activity at the same time.
Do you find that if you play again with a new group of people, like you have a different experience, or are you just like writing the same things throughout your life?
Well, I've played the game maybe like 25 times.
You're a good person to ask.
Yeah.
The replay value?
It is different every time. It's different. Even the story of my life is different every time. Because you like break it up by like the cities you live in, or the relationships, or like it yeah, you learn different things about yourself each time. I think like some things get closer and closer, like my perfect day and my ceremony are starting to coalesce, and I get into like more detail each time I do it. But people often say like, is this the kind of game you play once? And the answer is like, play it at least once, and then play it again like when it's no longer true. You know, like when it doesn't feel right anymore. You know, whenever that is for you.
Every birthday.
Yeah, once a year. My parents at Rosh Hashanah have made a thing about talking about death. That's fine. But we did play with my wife and my parents a couple weeks ago.
Oh my god.
It was.
But be careful. Like if you bring it up, like if I bring it up with my mom has more ideas for her own crying corner, and I'm like, Mom, we gotta stop talking about this crying corner. I'm doing it for you.
You open it with
So yeah, exactly. You don't open up the crying corner. The best. She's like, oh yeah, I want, and you know, when I'm doing these celebrations, I'll tell her like little details. And the other day I brought home a 3x4 poster, and she was like, I want one of those in my corner.
I love it. Is it only going to be a corner? I just want to understand.
No. It's going to be a massive room, but
Play
I'll
just
cry.
a little bit, you don't have to do the whole thing.
Yeah, honestly, most of the people who I play this with were not like really into the conversation about death, and they just wanted to like talk about your life and legacy. They play now, they play the first half, and they're like, I feel good. I don't need to go into the whole estate planning thing right now. But yeah, you can play as much as you want. It's also a game, like you collect tokens.
And they're replacement cards.
And they're replacement cards. You can buy more of these like cards, or you can just not actually write on them. Okay, I'm gonna hand these out. So I'm gonna let you choose which ones you want to do. Who would like to do the party, the invitation to your party? Because I feel like it's such a natural segue into Christina's thing. Maybe I'll let you like all get up. I'll just fan a few of them out. There's the party right there. There's your table of contents is good. This is the story of your life, if you want to take a stab at that. A good day. This is like your perfect day. Surprisingly tells you a lot about your end-of-life care. What really matters to you. Let's not do that one or that one or that one or that one. Let's do instruction manual. So if you want to write all your self-care practices, then that one is over here. And then I have a few pens, but not that many pens.
Okay. Here's another.
I'm sure I have to.
Okay. So if you need a pen, I'll have a few come around.
Here you go.
Thank you. Who would like a pen? Yes, anyone? You can write on the cards, don't worry, it's fine. You can keep this, keep it forever, put it on Instagram.
Yeah.
Tag nowandthen.xyz. Does anyone else need a pen? Yes. I really wish we could like take the time to really hear everyone's responses after this, but we'll have to be a little creative. The timer.
Somebody wrote it for me and it's surprisingly correct.
Oh, that's
Sing on, bro. Sing around the bottom.
You're right, we also sell kits where all the answers are made for you. Comes complete.
So is there something similar to this question in the smaller game?
In the deck of cards?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the whole body section would be reflective of that. They're not exactly that, because they're more about your life. This is more specific.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, that would be so fun.
And then actually Claire also overlaps with that part.
Got it.
I'll tell you when 5 minutes have passed, so you don't have to worry about it. But 3 minutes have passed. Good. Good. Yeah. Yeah. Ready in time for the holidays? Great holiday present.
Will they ship out before the holidays?
Yeah, they'll be there before the holiday season.
Is this the final one?
You can get it for Thanksgiving, but there's like a real premium because the Kickstarter ends like 2 weeks before. So you'd be buying one of these prototypes.
We already had Thanksgiving in Canada.
So you missed it.
Well.
And maybe just take one more minute. That'll be 5 minutes. I know, right? What?
Chapter 2.
You can keep working on it.
Crack myself up. Right? This is good. Oh my god, I read this book.
So the website, if you want to see the Kickstarter, is Now and Then, NOWANDTHEN.xyz. Like the end.
Get clever when .com is not available.
Or you can check out after.community, which is our website, which is our company. Just gonna wait for 5 minutes.
Oh, that's
Fancy, right? The right one's 5, and the one's 3, and the left one's 1. Yeah. The game doesn't actually come with that.
I was like, that's cool.
You bought it.
You've thought about everything.
Yeah, doesn't fit in the box. I would love to hear what some of you wrote. That's 5 minutes. I don't want to I want to make sure that there's time for other people to showcase some of their work. But just the one thing I'll say before kind of tying this up is this is definitely a product that we want anyone to buy and give to as gifts and use with your family, holidays, that starter packs. But really, I want this to be a tool that people who are in the end-of-life space can use. That death doulas, lawyers, estate planners, financial planners, that people can give as almost like to solve a very specific problem, something for you to do at home. So I imagine there's some of you in the end-of-life space here, if you see an opportunity to either co-brand, we already have that out, co-brand a starter pack with your company's logo that you want to give away or sell, similar with the board game. We want to make this the kind of thing that is a tool for the industry more than it is just a tool that's direct to consumer. So please approach me about that. I'm more than happy to make something happen there. And likewise, or similar to that, when people finish this game, you can already tell the next question would be like, okay, cool, how do I actually make this ceremony? Okay, cool, how do I actually get this will done? And so we have partners in different spaces. We're still signing for some of them, but we have a Canadian, I'm from Toronto, so a lot of the people who are playing this game are Canadian. I have a Canadian will company that you just go on and type in your answers and you get a will. And we have an agreement where I pipeline all of my people to them and they get a discount, and it's mutually beneficial for both of us to have like a resource like that. So if you're in the industry and you see that one of these questions can be a conduit to business for you, or if you want to use one of these tools, then yeah, that's some ideas, right?
Yeah.
Then yeah, we should definitely talk more. Yeah. I don't know if you want to. So one more time, the URL for the Kickstarter, because please do support the Kickstarter and share it, is nowandthen.xyz, and our company is after.community or aftercommunity.com, and my business cards are here also. Do you want to? I don't know what the timing is. Do you want to hear like some of the things that people wrote? Maybe let's hear from some of the other ones.
I would love to hear what everyone wrote. But I do want to make sure others get to share. You want to go, Garrett?
Oh, sure. So my name is Brittany again. I have the nonprofit here based in San Francisco. What we do mostly is our memoir making program. You can demo if you want. What we do is we have partners in the community to help us with outreach to seniors. So we just recently signed on to Source of Plowshares, which is a community of vets. So we have recently signed up a bunch of their residents, which is really exciting because we've always wanted to work with more vets. But if you're interested in getting more involved, not only in finding partnerships, volunteering to do the memoir making, and what's involved with that is that you would meet with a senior, and we match seniors and volunteers based on common interests, hobbies, experiences, preferences, and the volunteer will meet with the senior several times over the course of several months. It takes about 4 months to complete the process, but all you're doing is just having a conversation with your older adult, and you would record the conversations on your smartphone. We take those recordings, get them transcribed, and then we edit everything down, which ultimately becomes a book like this. Really happy to say that all of our book cover designs are volunteer created. All female designers and artists in San Francisco, which is really cool. And so there's a lot of ways you can get involved. We are a 100% volunteer run nonprofit, and we also host senior storytelling events and intergenerational conversation events. Our next senior storytelling event is actually this Sunday at 6 p.m. at the Red Victorian on Haight Street, and we have 3 really unique seniors speaking. Edith is a former social worker who worked in the VISTA program. She suffers from chronic fatigue syndrome, so she had to quit her job as a social worker and a therapist, and has the theme is journey, I want to say, but she's had a long journey of helping others. And we have Maria, who's 94 years old, and she's a former Navy vet who fought in the Korean War, and then after the war she converted to Catholicism and became a nun for 14 years, and then she left the convent and moved to San Francisco, had pet raccoons, went skydiving like a few times recently. So she's pretty cool. Yeah, she's really cool. And the last person that's speaking is someone I'm really excited to bring on. His name's Ken, and he has been homeless for 20 years in San Francisco. Graduated from a 4-year college here, UC Davis. Worked in the tech industry. So homelessness in San Francisco is something that a lot of people acknowledge, but shy away from. And hearing his stories and other stories like his is something that we're trying to do more of. It's free, so if you're around, come and check us out at the Red Victorian. One more thing, it's fundraising season pretty soon. And to do this, we sell these memory journals for $30. All proceeds go back to the organization. And what it is, it's a collection of questions, maybe not as fun as those questions, but the goal is to help have the conversations and help your loved ones record their history, since our program and our services are around the country. So this is a fun way to do this. It makes a good gift. $30. We go on Venmo. So that's it. Any questions or?
Yeah. For your, I'm interested in the vet program more. And are you doing things for, say, I think like the anniversary of like the Marines is like coming up on the 11th or Thanksgiving, or are you doing anything around that? Do you also do like, you tell me what you're doing, I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, no, I mean, we try to do as many events as we can. We're trying to think of themes for the future. We haven't had a veteran themed event. We try to create events that have unique people speaking and don't exclude a lot of people, but that's something that is interesting, and we're exploring different events in 2020. We had, I think, around 8 this year, starting to pilot more in other cities, so that's something that's definitely on our radar.
It sounds like you have lots of volunteers, so is it that you're having not enough people sign up to have their story told?
Yeah,
or?
it's a challenge of finding older adults, and also a challenge of fundraising and funding. That's keeping us. And also, I have a full-time job in addition to this. And I do all the editing. Kevin and Hong have helped a lot, actually. But the boots on the ground, like operations, it takes a long time. So we're thinking of ways to streamline the process. But like operations, funding, outreach are our main challenges.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I mean, I showed the photos earlier, obviously. I guess I think the only thing I want to say is like, this almost relates to the first question you asked, but it's like, what I've learned in the last, 4 years, and since going through the process in the way that I have, is that grief needs an outlet. And so, like I said, like when I shared those photos, so many people reached out to me, or I have a written component that goes with the photos as well, and that got picked up by an online site, Board Panda, and then it got passed around a fair bit. And
what's the name of your organization?
Just Josh Neufeld Photography, and then I also have the community resource griefnarratives.com. I have all that stuff here. But even on the Board Panda article, which was just my both the written and photo essay, like once I had put that out there into the world, hundreds of people commented and shared their story. Oh, I lost my mother this way, or I lost my brother this way, or my sister this way. And like I was saying earlier, like it is for some reason such a taboo subject, even though, like we were saying earlier, like it's a completely universal experience. So the biggest thing to me is just recognize that grief needs an outlet, and again, like if you care about the conversation, then engage with it in people. Put yourself out there, because that's how you open those doors. First through the wall gets the blaze kind of thing. Like, but if you want people to have that conversation, then you have to be willing to engage with it yourself. So, that's all.
We'll just run that. Alive Inside is the name of the prison program specific to You're Going to Die that I run, but You're Going to Die is an amazing outlet for exactly that. Being with others just in this conversation in different ways, and to experience it with the lens of creativity for some has been, for myself, I can speak for myself, has been a tremendous gift. And I would really encourage you to attend, and I would love to see the people in this room in those spaces and have those experiences. For people who are even in this room, I think they could also speak to the power of being in community and being able to express creatively around that. So I hope to see you there. And you know, all the information's online, but yeah.
It's an awesome experience. I can back it up. There's some very heartfelt stories and fantastic musicians, and Ned's his name?
Yeah, Ned Weissgold is the founder. Yeah.
Fantastic MC / leader of emotions, I would say. He kind of gets up there and just leaves the full gamut of emotions out there. And on his initial speech, you laugh, you cry, you know, he just makes it very, very easy for everyone to feel whatever it is they want to feel within the space. So as someone not involved in the organization, I can back her up definitely a worthwhile venture to go check it out.
He's a great hugger too.
Yes, he is a fantastic hugger. I had to get a hug by the end of it. Toby tells you your time's up, he slowly gives you a hug. You get on the floor and crawl.
When is the next one?
The next one's November 14th. Yeah, November 14th. It's at a place called the Lost Church, 65 Cap Street in the Mission. And tickets are $10, and definitely email if that's a barrier. But they always sell out. So I really recommend, if you're interested, getting a ticket now. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. So I was at ReImagine last year, and I led a little baby workshop. But I'll just give you a couple of tips. I'll distill it all. I know that my mom is definitely watching on Facebook Live. Everybody say hi to my mom. Oh my God. And shout out to all the parents out there of all the millennials. Like, they're the support, the love, the like, you can do it, honey. And see, I've got somebody taking my picture. Anyway, so I run a company called New Narrative Memorials, and as my little postcard says, we're not your grandma's funeral unless it's your grandma's funeral. So when somebody is tasked with planning a memorial, I will usually go through, I'll distill a big scary event into the 7 main components. So there's the venue, food and beverage, there's audiovisual, speeches and service, music, florals, greenery, living things, and special touches. And what I like to do is, I've done a pyramid in the past where it's very helpful. We'll start from the bottom. So the bottom is food and beverage and venue, because those two things will really inform how the rest of your event is going to go. And actually underneath that, like the bigger foundation to the pyramid is your attendee list. And because a 20-person event is going to have a very different feel than a 20,000-person event, like my memorial, 20,000-person event.
With
With the crying corner, like line up out the door. It's gonna be great. But it's so starting with those two big components, once you get those figured out, it really informs a lot of the decisions. And then when you get over to the top, it's like the special touches are a lot more nuanced and more to the person that you're celebrating. So if you have to support someone to plan a memorial, like always starting from the bottom, and I'm more than happy to share this pyramid. Feel free to take one of my cards and send me an email, because I find it's really helpful and takes, again, a big scary event that you have maybe 2 weeks to a month to plan, and you distill it down into just the basics. But like I was saying, the big thing that's underlined is your attendee list, and it's like, how the heck do you plan this big celebration of life without knowing how many people are going to be there? And so one thing I like to do with clients, a family that I worked with in August, a friend of mine said, I don't know who's going to come to the memorial. And I said, well, why don't we sit together and let's brainstorm this? So we created a literal mind map in front of her. So we wrote the person's name in the middle, and then we created a branch for immediate family, created a branch for extended family, created a branch for colleagues, clients, friends. What about your friends as the daughter? What about your husband's friends? Your kids, what about their friends? Would they want to come to this celebration? And you just keep going with different networks, and then you assign 1 or 2 people in each of those branches to spread the word, to collect RSVPs, so you as a family are not super overwhelmed, but that you kind of have people who are doing the work out there for you. They feel like they're involved, then they can kind of report back. But yeah, it can be hard and difficult, and just like bringing all these personal touches into an event is really, really meaningful. And then if I were to give you all some more unsolicited event advice, it would be activities. Like doing some activities at a celebration of life, like whether that's a video station or a paint by numbers picture of your face, which is also going to be at mine. Like writing down favorite memories on photos or on postcards, or something more than a guest book, something where you can record these memories and collect them all together to give to the family afterwards, or one of the online tools that are out there. Like Gathering Us or like LifeWeb or something. Like there are so many ways to compile these memories, because at the end of the day, when else are you going to get so many people from so many different pockets of friend lists and pockets of your life under the same roof, and you want to capture that and capitalize on, you want to capture all those memories, and it's not going to happen again, and you want to be able to enjoy the day, so that's why you hire someone like me, so I can take care of the little stuff so you enjoy hearing these stories. Anyway, feel free to take one of my cards. I'm happy to answer any questions. That's my little demo.
Love it. That's awesome.
My mom is probably so proud right now.
And plug, I have used her triangle pyramid activity in other programs that I've done, and it really is very useful.
Yeah.
Although, jumping back to the we don't think about it happening now. Everyone I've done with is like, when I'm 80 and this is happening, this is what I want.
And do you have people planning it, but also having it before they die?
I haven't had that honor to do a living celebration of life. However, I have helped a couple of friends who are doulas who have used, who have done living memorials. Yeah, and one of them, her name is Brandy, and she shared a photo on Instagram with permission of the family, and it's like, this woman who's in a wheelchair just got a, oxygen mask. She's holding up this thing. Sorry. Marguerite. She got a huge glass of white wine, and she's so happy. And I'm just like, man, that's so good. But yeah, it's like, but it can also be a really heavy thing. Like I didn't really, I leaned into the happy, like the celebratory part of it until I saw the HBO movie Alternate Endings. And it's like, you really, if anybody hasn't seen it, very accessible, very good watch. But yeah, they document somebody's living memorial, and it's like those get really really intense, and just there's a lot of emotion and there's just a lot in that room. Like it's so good, so powerful. But Brandy's Instagram, actually, when she posted that photo, it was like 5 tips that she has for doing a living memorial, and it was really good. It was like one of the tips was how to setting the tone of the event and letting your attendees know, just almost setting some ground rules so everybody walks into the space knowing what to expect and knowing what's going to happen. And her Instagram, awesome, is honor with a U because we're Canadian. Honor oh God, she's probably watching and she's like, oh, my Instagram's wrong. Honor End of Life Care, and I'm happy to give it out. And she's one of my followers. But yeah, she's got a lot of great tips as a practicing doula for a living memorial.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I don't really have much to demo. I just demoed the last 2 hours with my demo. Thank you all for coming. You guys traveled very far. So, I mean, this is what I do. This is what I love to do. Just bringing people together to have these conversations. Like I said earlier, people of all ages. I've done programs with teens, with millennials, with individuals in nursing homes, in assisted livings, everything between. So if there's any sort of community or family that you think could benefit from a conversation like this, please let me know, get in touch. And I will also put out my business cards because I forgot to do that. But I just wanted to, at this time, we're hopefully going to have a tour of the funeral home, if you're interested. Abe just ran out to confirm that. But I really just wanted to thank, first of all, each of you, the 5 panelists. You guys are amazing, and like I said, traveled from near and far to come and be part of this. And I'm so in awe of all the work that you guys are doing and where it's come from and how you've gotten here. So thank you for sharing yourselves and your stories with us. And I want to thank all of you who came. Are we good?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you for all for being here, for supporting programs and conversations like this one, and for being willing to dig in and to kind of go deep with this, and for taking the steps to write the endings to your own stories. We each get one life. May we live it well and end it well. Thank you. What's our tour situation?
Thanks, followers on Facebook.
Bye, Facebook.
Bye, Facebook.